So there are in India there are more than 2800 caste and subcaste with some differences. So if we talk about the correct definition of caste, so Lenberg in 1968 he defined the caste as a caste is a society category whose members are assigned a permanent status within a given society hierarchy and whose contacts are restricted accordingly. So here the definition has already made a clear view about the caste that it is a society means it's not origin of a human being but it is originated from the society whose members means it have a rule and regulation like they have a memberships and all. So those who are in that society they are assigned with a permanent status within a given society. Okay, permanent status here means if they are living, if they are called as fishermen, then they are permanently they are fishermen forever. Okay, and within a given society hierarchy, or even in that also, even the permanent status, they have some hierarchy in that, and whose con- contacts are restricted accordingly. So according to their permanent status, according to their status in the society hierarchy, they have some contact and there are some restricted rules and regulations which restrict them to mingle with other hierarchy, other society hierarchy people. A.G. Green has also given us definition to caste. That is, caste is a system of stratification in which mobility up and down the status ladder, at least ideally, may or not occur. So, A.G. Green said, like, it is a stratification, division in the society, which which is not permanent, and people can uh, take efforts to go up in the hierarchy and come down in the hierarchy according to their status. If they increase their status or if they improve their status, they can go up. If their status has been affected by different things, then they can come down. Then classification of status, caste, according to Varna means according to the color. They have divided in India. They have divided into four categories that are Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Sudras. According to Jati means the species or kind of anything. They are divided into four categories. The first one is a region or a local sub classification, including a more complex system consisting of hundred or even thousands of castes and subcastes. Its hierarchy is more local classified that varies from region to region. So if you talk about the history of the caste, the Varnas classification is roughly 300 years, 3000 years ago. So the Varnas, according to the color classification, has been divided in 3000 years ago. That means that this is the culture which is followed in India in 3000 years ago. So the caste system stood for different things in different time periods. So it wasn't a constant thing. So it was changing according to the time period, um, according to the rule or according to their jobs or services they provided. Can't say it is misleading the same thing for last 3000 years. In the Vedic period, roughly in 900 to 500 BCs, the caste was in Varna system consisting of only four major divisions. These divisions were not very elaborate or very rigid and not determined by birth. So, as the second point here is second and third point has clearly defined that the caste system was changing according to the time period, and it was misleading the same thing for 3000 years. So here, as said, like in Vedic period, the caste system was only a four division, and Varnas, according to the color, the caste system was about four division, and these divisions were not elaborated. It was rigid, only four, not more than four or not less than four, and it wasn't rigid. Means all the rules and regulation which were followed in that thing were not constant. It could be changed or it can be changed. It would be changed in that time, and it wasn't defined by birth. Where are you born? It wasn't a matter of the caste. The movement across the category was possible and common. Okay, so the movement according to the category was possible. Like, for example, 3000 years ago, if you want to know that it was about the um, Rishi Muni time, where local people and the Sadhvik people were there. So if some person who is from a local family and tries and prays and tries to devote his life towards the god, towards the nature, then they used to be uh, transferred into some other identity that was from a common person to a sadhvik, that we call as a religious person or a priest, and then they can have all the uh, facility of that particular uh, caste in that time. So this is an example, normal example. If you talk about the kingship, if a king has a minister and his minister's boy is a person who is in the um, army or the chief of the army, like Senapati, then he was not a Kshatriya, or the minister was not of the upper caste like Brahmin. So in one family, it become like there are different people belonging to different castes. Like father is from the higher caste, the son may be from the Kshatriya caste, like that. So in Vedic period, this thing was not rigid, means it was not fixed that this person is going to be belonging to this thing. Or you are born in a Pandit family, so you will be called as a Pandit. Or if you are born in a Brahmin family, so you will be called as a Brahmin. But this connotation changed after the Vedic period. These things became rigid, and it was determined by the birth. Membership in the caste includes strict regulations. Like if you are following this, you have to follow this without questioning the society system. Okay, caste membership also involves rules about food and food sharing. To whom they need to share, to whom they give to the share to of the food, uh, which type of people, how to eat, and what type of food you should consume. So, caste involves a system consisting of many castes arranged in a hierarchy and rank and status. So, in a particular caste, there are also a different subcaste or some order they have made through which they were signifying the person's status in the society. They have subdivisions within themselves. It wasn't like only if it was like in before Vedic period, it was fixed like four division only. But in the post Vedic, in one particular division, it started to have subdivisions, and in subdivisions also they have many subdivisions. So caste was traditionally linked to the occupation. So now, and before it was related to the work we have done, or the um, it was flexible, but after the Vedic period it started to be rigid, and it was fixed what type of occupation you are following, and through this occupation what you will be called as. Then caste in present. So this was about the history. Now we move on to the present. What does in the caste system in the present society means? So society, sociologist and social anthropologist coined many new concepts to try and understand the process of change. They came up with two common terms that was used so often. One was Sanskritization and second was dominant caste. So, um, like in the modern present time, there these society has been defined or being elaborated or segregated into different things, and uh, but still people have made that much effort to uplift their status and uh, have a equilibrium, a balance between the higher caste and the lower caste, and they became uh, like equal in front of each other. So many scientists were studying all this, the process of change that was coming up. So they came up with two particular terms. The first one was Sanskritization, and the second was word dominant caste. So what does the Sanskritization means? So, if you talk about the Sanskritization, it refers to a process where by member of a caste attempt to raise their own social status. So, they saw like some members they don't want to fall in the category of the caste which was given to them by birth. So they started to have some modification in their work, in their occupation, in their way of living, in their behavior, in their wearing style, so that they can raise their status to the another caste hierarchy by adopting what then how they wanted to change their status is by adopting the rituals, domestic and social practices of the higher societies. So mainly they wanted to compare themselves, or they wanted to make themselves equal to Brahmins and Kshatriyas. So they adopted some of the practices that was followed by the Brahmins or by the Kshatriyas in that in the hierarchy of the society to uplift their status in the society. So the practices adopted was mainly what were the common practices that was adopted from these two major caste, the Brahmins and the Kshatriyas, were the vegetarianism, only eating plants and animals, not going on to the killing of the any life. Okay, wearing of the sacred thread that most of the Brahmins they wear, performance of the specific prayer for a specific occasion and all, like for that they have some particular prayers and rituals for birth, they have for mundans and all, for namkar and chatis and all that there. If you talk about marriage, they have some prayers and all, to make the even to inauguration of the house also they have some rituals and prayers. So these were all things they adopted from the higher caste to make themselves equal to the higher caste and make their status uplifted. So this was what Sanskritization means. Their Sanskriti was means the caste that the people, the group of the people that they were having, these people were trying to adopt the Sanskritis of these two higher castes and wanted to become equal to them. Then, what about the dominant caste? The second was about the dominant caste. At present, these two things are going on. The second one is dominant caste. So, what does the dominant caste means? It refers to those castes which has a large population as was granted land rights. These were the population whose those who were involved in the management of agricultural land but were not the cultivators. Okay. They used to hire the labor from the lower caste and the untouchable caste for the leveling and tending of the land. So, dominant by the word, it means to rule over. So, like in Sanskritization, we studied about there were some people who adopted some rituals from the higher caste to become or to become almost equal to the higher caste. So, same, there were some dominant caste also. They also came up. They were people with the land, right? But they were not directly involved in like landlord work. They were people who was like munshi, like yadavs, like we can say a mediator that they were trying to become. So they used to have laborers from the lower caste. Lower caste are sudras and vaishyas. And untouchable people means in that also there are so many subcasts and all. So untouchable people were there, and they were making the making this labor to level the land so that they can produce good agriculture food. Once they get land right, they requires considerable economic power. So once they get some land rights, they become automatically powerful and they try to hire people from the lower caste and become like a and act like a boss or a supervisor. So these intermediate castes become the dominant caste in the countryside and played a decisive role in regional politics and agri-economics. So these people mostly their occupation, this caste occupation was about agriculture. So these people they started taking part in the regional political things and they try to come up with agriculture economic try to help the uplift the agriculture sector and wanted to gain some monetary or the financial support from this agriculture. So if you talk about who are these, so there are some examples that has been given in this is are Yadavs from Bihar and Uttar Pradesh, the Reddys and Khammans from Andhra Pradesh, the Marathas from Maharashtra, the Jats of Punjab, Haryana and Western UP, Uttar Pradesh, and the Patidars of Gujarat. So the second factors in the social institution world is about the tribes. So what does a tribe mean? Tribes is a modern term for communities that are very old, being among the oldest in habitations and subconsistent con- contains. Tribe in India has generally been defined in terms of what they were not. They were communities that did not practice a religion with a written text. Okay, so like here tribes modern thing has been divided. It is a very older than the people who started to do the caste system. I think so. But in India, the caste is always sorry, the tribe is not always defined in the way of religion, way of what they are defined as. Okay, so they what they actually look is not from what their origin or their culture is. So they don't follow any religion that has a written text. They do not have a status or political form of normal kind. They do not sharp, shape, sharp class division. So they do not have sharp class division like this is what Brahmins are, this is what Kshatriyas are, this is not Vaishyas are, this is not Sudras are. So this they don't have this kind of class division in them. So they do not have caste and were neither Hindus or the peasants. So they were not falling in the most of that category that Hindus or they were not farmers also. So they were divided into trades. The first one was permanent trades and the second was acquired trades. So the permanent trades, if you talk about the permanent trades in India, so there are 85% of the tribal population living in middle India, stretching from Gujarat and Rajasthan in the west to West Bengal and Odisha in the east, with mm, Madhya Pradesh, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, and part of Maharashtra and Andhra Pradesh. The remaining 15 out of which 11% is in the northeast status, leaving only 3% in the rest of the country. So, if we look at the share of the tribes in the state population, the northeast has the highest concentration. The ecological habitat covers include hills, mountain, rural plain, urban industry area. In terms of language, they are divided into four categories: Indo-Aryans, Dravinas, Dravidian, Asserti, Tibeto-Burman. In terms of size, the biggest tribe are the Gondas, Bhil, Bodas, and Mundas. According to Census 2011, it is 88.6% of the population, or about 104 million tribe people are there in India. If you talk about the acquired tribes, there are they are classified into two main category: mode of living and extent of incorporative into Hindu society, a combination of two. Their mode of living of these tribes depending upon the uh, occupation they perform, like fishermen, food gatherers, hunters, shift agriculture, doing shift agriculture, they were peasants, plantation and industrial workers. So moving on to the second, on to the further things. In the last class, we have discussed, in the last lecture, we have discussed about the different contact methods that an extension agent use to contact his program or to communicate his program or to disseminate the information that he wants to do to the farmer through different various methods. Some of the methods were about the learning teaching extension program method, that was about how the learner learn and what teaching should be given to the uh, farmers so that they are able to understand everything, and they and the aim of the extension worker extension agent should be completed through the program that is conducting in the village or in the rural society with the farmers. The all the programs should be benefited to the farmers according to their local condition, according to their cultural condition, according to their uh, on ground requirement. So now we move on to different contact method. As in last lecture, we have already seen a lot of uh, things that is given, as if like the first one was about uh, uh, the learning teaching contact method has been divided into two factors, that is according to the uh, contact base or according to the use. So now we will start with each and every factors and learn how um, according to uh, according to use how many ways, and according to form. So according to use, the first one was individual contact method. So individual contact method, as itself signifies that it is individually you are contacting to the person. Okay, so this is a very nice way to contact, because you are focusing wholeheartedly to that particular person when you are talking to them. If the communication is happening in one to one, face to face, it is more understandable and uh, more more reasonable. Why it is more reasonable? Because many of the things that we give in a group, it is very difficult for us to understand each and every factors. But when we are talking in individual ways, face to face ways, in that condition, it's very effective, because we know that what is happening and how you can contact. And if there is some doubts and all, you don't hesitate to ask, you don't feel shy to ask. Okay, so the first individual contact method, that is about individual contact methods are divided into many forms, but we will talk about the most used form that a extension worker use while communicating to the farmers. Okay, so uh, the first form is farm and house visit. So, as the name only signifies that extension agriculture extension worker is visiting, or agent is visiting a farmer individually and trying to understand the fact that how the things are going on. Okay, so the farm and home house visit. It is a face-to-face type of individual contact by the extension worker with the farmer and or the member of his family on the latter farm or at his home for one or more specific purpose contacted with the extension. Okay, so like if a person, if an extension worker is going to the village to understand the basic and the local need of the farmer, he or she should have a individual contact to the farmer. Why? Because um, it is like I have already said, it is very convenience convenient to talk to a person about the problems independently or with the freedom. If the person is alone and he doesn't feel or she doesn't feel like the farmers, they doesn't feel hesitating to tell actually what is on ground happening. So before starting any program, most of the extension workers, they go for a home visit or the farm visit to understand whether they how much their program is going to affect the people, and how much uh, more effort that they have to put to make the situation better um, from the present situation. What is the objective of farm visit or the house visits are? First, it obtain give first-hand information on a matter related to farm and house condition. So, like I have said, whatever the perception a agriculture extension worker makes and come to the farm, come to the farm, come to the farmer's family, or the village area. There are so many other information that he wants or she wants to know to start his program. So it's like a first hand information that is given to the people for the people to understand the fact. Then the second one is give advice or otherwise assist to solve a specific problem or to teach skill. So if by for example, if a person tells that I don't have any other source of income for my for family, so that the extension worker should give some alternative occupation idea, so that the person in his or in their free time, when there is time for preparation of the land, after the preparation of the land or after the sowing, there is enough time, so they can do another type of activity and earn the money. Okay, arouse the interest of those not reached by other methods. So it's not like other methods can be are there. So many methods are there. So you have to make an like make some um, programs that are interesting for the farmers, so that they can take interest in that, and they can realize like the how much that is important for them. Select local leader demonstrators or cooperators. So um, in farm visit, first of all you will go to the panchayat, and somebody the panchayat raj or the sarpanch of that village will give some will allow somebody to accompany you, so that you can come with that person and go for the farm visit and all. Then promote good public relation. So like if leaders are from the village or the demonstrator are from the village, it is very effective to make your program understandable to the farmers. So it's means it promotes a good public relation. So when you go with somebody who is very known to the farm village, and you interact with that, then he will also give you some, or she will also give you some idea about that particular family, so that you get closer to that family, understand that thing, understand the basic problem, on ground problem of that family. Otherwise contribute to strengthening the extension organization or facilitate extension program. So all these five factors, it they individually supports the last factor, that is strengthening the extension organization and facilitating extension program. So they indirectly facilitate the extension program by understanding the on ground situation of that family. Then, what is the principle or the procedure to be followed? The first one is to decide upon the place of the farm and home visit in the teaching plan outlined to advise a particular phase of extension program. Like they are divided into two parts. Consider alternative method which might be employed, and decide whether the visit are primarily for direct teaching or need to increase the effectiveness of the group method and mass media. So it's like we need to decide where they want to meet you, whether they want to meet you in the farm or whether they will invite you on the in the house. And understand you have to be prepared in your mind. If they are going to ask you to visit the farm, then what are the questions you will relate to them, you will ask to them related to the farm. And if they are asking for visiting to the house, then what are the things you have to ask and in which way you should ask. The first thing is that. And in that also, two more factors are there. First one is you should know the alternative methods. Okay, so alternative methods to understand how much this is going to affect the uh, person. If there is a problem, what are the solution you will give? And you should have a list of, or you should have prepare your mind. This might be the problems, and we can go through it. And these are the alternatives that you I might say to that farmer. Okay, then second point is like decide, in that B part is like decide whether the visit are primary for direct teaching or need to increase the effective. So if this method is okay, or you need to have more understand the common problem and make a group, and how you will solve that group problem as a group problem, understanding from the individual visit. Then second principle is clarify the purpose of the visit. It's not like you go to the someone's house and you just have chit chat with them and come out. No, it's not like that. You should be clearly telling them, I have come here with this agenda in my mind and I need to help you, and how much, and this is what I have been seen on the ground, how much you are going to support me in this. So this is a clear cut way. Then plan the visit. It's not like randomly you go and ask a person and you go to that person's house and you just go and asking so many things without understanding the actual reason why you have come there, and why the farmer also wants to give you answer. You need to have a clarification on that, and after clarification you need to have a plan, what you are going to ask, from what point you will start. Okay, so the first, it has been divided into 5 parts. The first one is review previous contact with members of the family. So, if there are other people also, if they have already talked to the other workers, so you go and ask to that person, what was that, whether you have beforehand you went and given the information that I will come tomorrow to have some talk with you and all. Okay, check the subject matter information likely to be needed, leaflet or bulletins. Like if you need to have some you want to give information about the fertilizers, you want to give the information about dairy farming and all, so you need to have some handouts with you so that the people are interested to talk to you. Workout schedule of visit in the community to save time. It's not like you one day you will go in two families and other day you have time and you go in the seven families. It's not like that. So you need to work out like today how many families you will go, what are the question you will ask, what was left behind, what was unanswered. You have to review everything and then plan a new thing. Remote and unfrequent farms and house homes should always be kept in mind. So it's not like only the families that is considered by the panchayat you go and visit that particular family. No, it's not like that. You try to go to the families who are left behind, or some other, because of some other reason they do not, they hesitate to talk to the people. So try to accompany some of the people to talk to them so that you get a full outline of whatever the things are going on. Consider best approach in view of individual family situation. Okay, whatever the situation the family is going through, you need to have a some best approaches to how you will go and talk to that family. For example, if there is a family who is from the lower caste and they have been um, punished for some, not just lower caste or any other reason, they have punished for some crime or something, they have thrown out of the village. So they are the part of the village but they are living outside the village. So you need to have some uh, approaches to go and talk to them so that they can also tell you what are the problem they are facing, and how these problems can be resolved. Then the fourth uh, principle is make the visit. Okay, so you have already planned. This was the outline you got from the first hand information you have got from the panchayat, and now it's time to make a visit. So first they have 10 approaches that should be 10 approaches that should be kept in mind while making the visit. The first one is punctuality. If you have tell that I will come at 10 o'clock, please be there at 10 o'clock, because maybe the farmer will go to the farm for some work, or maybe they will have food or something, maybe they will have some other work. So let them finish all that, get free, and then you go there so that they can give you full time and full information whatever you are going to ask. Be friendly, sympathetic to them. So it's not like you go there, you ask like a survey person, "Oh, what was this and that," without having any politeness in your voice. Be humble to them, be friendly to them. Start asking about the journal thing and then go to the in-depth way. It's it's not like by question they will answer you as if like they are interviewer, you are interviewer, and they are interviewee. They will go and give the interviews, you mark the answers, and that's over. Okay, then the point is gain and desire interview confidence. Even it's many of the in the rural area, most of the farmers are very conservative. They don't want to expose anything, they don't want to talk to the other people. They don't want to have any interaction with the outside people. So try to gain their confidence, try to understand whether they are interested in talking to you or not. Let the farmers do most of the talking. It's not like always you are talking from your side. Ask them a little bit question and go on adding, okay, what happened, then what happened, then what happened. Let him tell you everything about the farm and the family. Speak only when he is willing to hear you. It's not like you will cut him in between and start telling you the new things. Okay, I think this is good. I think this is. Don't say like that. Try to understand what he wants to hear from you and how much he wants to tell you. Talk in terms of his interest, not in your interest. Use natural and easy language. Speak slowly and cheerfully. It's not like with rude, okay, I need to complete this today, I need to complete this family, so please give me the answer and I will go. Don't be rude like that. Be polite, go on slowly, because nobody opens with a person who is first time visiting you. You need to have a good relation to that family so that they have trust on you and they will tell the problems. Be accurate in your statements. Okay, if you say like, I have uh, seen that according to your panchayat, if this much hectare land has been allotted to you, and this much is uh, under depth, or this much is under some other condition. So you need to be accurate. It's not like it's not like you will try to tell other facts and then try to manipulate them. Then the last point in this is, don't prolong argument. It's not like, okay, you are going on, and if they don't disagree, don't try to prolong that thing. Just tell them, okay, I thought like it is like that. I thought, what do you think? It's good or bad? Just tell that in an appropriate way. Use nature, means same thing, natural and easy language. Okay, then use the remote, visit the remote area and people. uh, Remember the farmer about the reminding the farmer about the recommendation by different ways of repetitions as a reinforcement technique. So all that, use some, be prepared to have some specimen, means some booklets or some demonstration to the farmers. Review the previous contact, whether they gave the answer for this particular question or not, or how they reacted on this particular situation when you ask that thing to them. Okay, visit a cross section of farmers so that the favoritism may be avoided. So don't say like only you are going on visiting the farmers who are big landholders. Go to the small landholders, or even to the people who works in others farm also. Don't just go to the only the big landholders and talk to them, or only the panchayats people go and talk to them. Don't do that thing. You need to have, you need to touch every single part of that village, every single part of that uh, farmer, every village farmer, so that you can understand the real on ground things of that thing, of the farmer. Okay, so in the next session, we will learn about what is field trial, and which is the second method of individual contact method, and what are their outcomes, and how much it is advan- advantage, or what are the limitation of that things.